to the Horror Hour.
They're so down.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
Get you.
You are going to die for me.
Here's Johnny.
It's all for you.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Horror Hour. It's the place we discuss, we debate, we disagree on all things horror. I'm one of the co-hosts here. We're the only one for today, Yutaka. And today I'm really excited because I am sitting down with Perry Blackshear, who his 2021 film, When I Consume You, which he wrote, directed, edited, produced. I mean, you did everything on this, man. So first off, let's talk about the log line that I got was just basically a brother and sister seeking revenge on a mysterious stalker, and then the shot was Daphne and Wilson looking back, and it was just, I was like, I need to see this. So tell me, what brought this story about?
Oh yeah, that's great. So it's funny because I keep looking back on trying to figure out exactly where it came from. And a lot of times these things are sort of like trying to transcribe nightmares, where you transcribe it and then you're like, huh, maybe I'm not smart to psychoanalyze myself enough to know where this came from, but it definitely came from somewhere deep in the id somewhere. I think the threads that I go back to are I remember reading that loneliness, I don't know if this is true, this may be like a Twitter fact, but that loneliness fires the same receptors in the brain as physical pain. Like when and that's partly why it feels so unbearable. And I that feels true to my own experience when I was younger in my 20s. And so I thought I wanted to make a movie about loneliness that felt really physical and like bring it out of your head and into some sort of tactile experience. And then I think the other thing was this, there was a part of an earlier story there about this brother-sister duo, both with very different ways of going through the world, and having to go through a kind of second coming of age where the way they were when they were younger, faced with some new horrible threat, they need to change. And specifically, the guy character needs to go through this whole sort of renaissance. And then maybe it's like, if what's that quote, personalities are just coping mechanisms. And so if like if your personality is just a coping mechanism and you have to have a new coping mechanism now, then what happens to your soul along the way? Basically, I think those were the
Oh, wow.
those were the two big things that influenced it.
I mean, good Lord, just after, us going through the pandemic, I mean, I could easily, when you say loneliness as physical pain, like that is, yeah, I could, oof. Yeah, and I also really, the relationship between the brother and sister, I think that to me felt like that was the heart of the film, even though there was so much more to that. But working with those two actors and forming that bond, how was that?
Well, that was just a joy. Evan I've worked with for a long time. He's an old friend from college, and Libby was a friend of his. We were looking for, we couldn't work with Margaret just because it was the brother sister, so we were looking for an actress, and so we started with friends of friends.
Mm-hmm.
And Libby, I mean, in addition to just being the coolest person ever, who was really ready to work like we worked. And we shoot sort of like a documentary. It's basically no crew. It's just myself and the actors. So the actors have to be filmmakers themselves sometimes. And that comes with it. I mean, it's very hard on the actors. They have to do so much in addition to acting, but they also get a lot of freedom
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of creative input. And it becomes more like being in a band, basically. I don't know if you've ever been part of a band, but it's I have in college. It is very psychologically, it's like being in a relationship with four different people at once,
Oh
and someone's
gosh.
always mad and it's always a thing.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
choosing who you work with is so important. And Libby's just, and in addition to being an amazing person, is an amazing actress. And she and Evan already were close, but then they lived together during the shoot. They rehearsed it for months before in LA.
Wow.
And we also developed the characters together. You know, especially for, you know, doing something that is this serious. I care a lot about this sort of world and have people that experience things like this in my life, and also know that people in my life work in the mental health field. So you know, there's a lot of, we all cared about doing it right. So I think also, in addition to being great people, great actors, it's like they really threw themselves into the, you know, having a purpose behind all this, or doing it right, basically trying our best to do it right.
And you know, that's one of the things that I truly love and appreciated about this film. You know, I'm a huge mental health advocate, and so anytime someone starts to bring that into a film, I always worry that it might be a little bit exploitive or
Yeah.
exploitative. But this wasn't. This was honest. It was raw. Like I won't spoil scenes, but I just remember when the one of the flashbacks, though, like that gutted me, just seeing that, and the relationship. And it also shows also how addiction can really just ruin who you are, but you also want to have to get better. Like the story that you had told, like I was just, it was, I was expecting horror, but I was not expecting to be just so, like it was a like you just took my heart out in this film. Like there were
Oh, well,
scenes
thank
that I
you,
just
man.
truly enjoyed just from a horror aspect, but this was deep, and this, you really did handle that with care. And I really, to hear that you put that, you know, that thought into it. And so as the creator, and so were the actors, I just makes me appreciate this film even more.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's so great to, I mean, you know, it's like making a film when it's personal and putting it out into the world. It's like that's the horror movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like you
oh,
have
I
no idea
bet.
you have no idea what's gonna happen. It's like you know, it's like putting a kid out into the world, and you're like off to college. You're just like, we hope people like you. We hope we did an okay job here. You know, and it's definitely, you know, the movie's not for everybody. It does mix like a real sort of psychological drama in the
Hmm.
middle of this thing that has other horror elements. So, but it's so great to talk to people that, um, so I mean, that's the stuff that I care about. So I'm really glad yeah, I mean, I care a lot about that stuff, and that scene came from, you know, experience of myself and the actors, and so we tried to make it feel like what it was like to be the two characters in that situation. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing too is obviously you said it was like a bare bones crew. And so I felt with the way you shot this, I felt I was there with them. And so
Hmm.
that's why, along with just their portrayal, I felt that I was kind of like on their shoulder, experiencing this with them. And so I guess, and just hearing how the actors also assisted with this, what was it like just shooting this project?
Well, I think, you know, I worked as a gaffer and a cinematographer for many years and saw friends of mine go into so much debt, and their productions really get strangled by the stuff of it all. And
Hmm.
they were sitting there freaking out about money the whole shoot, or freaking out about how they needed to park the cube truck in the thing, but now that's been violation. Like that was mostly what sets were. And I was actually really inspired. It's so funny. I used to talk about it all the time, and now I feel like I can't because it feels like such a name drop. I went to school with, and like was part of a sort of writers group with Chloe Chow. We had a great NYU class. Ashaka King was in the class. Pram
Oh, wow.
Romanowski. It was anyway, but her first movie, which I really recommend if no one has seen it, Songs My Brothers Taught Me, and her second, The Rider, was made with a 5-person crew and shot like a documentary. And I thought that is the, I mean, if I could do something like that, like, I mean, I can't, I can't make those movies, but bringing that sort of like intimacy
Hmm.
and, you know, the real like personal, you know, more like a band where it's just you and some people you really trust making something together. I mean, I was also inspired by Bergman with his little troupe of sort of 12 people on his islands. Again, I can't make Bergman films, but that idea of working with people you like, and it, I mean, God, are there disadvantages? Like we were out there so late, and something broke, and so we're like, well, now we can't use that because we don't have a PA, or we just have to go to a bodega, or like if it rains, we just have to figure. So it rained one night, and we had to go under a bridge, and then there was like these horrible raccoons, like New York raccoons everywhere that like
What?
were fucking with us. Like they did not. They were like honey badger raccoons. They did not give a fuck about us, and we're just in our face the whole time. Uh,
What?
so it's a weird process with huge disadvantages, but also the advantage of it being very intimate and very personal, and getting to really focus on acting and performance and the themes of the movie. So it's not for everybody. The movie's not for everybody, but this is the kind of stuff that we love.
I mean, I think when you say that, though, it sounds to me like you had so much more creativity that you could do with it. But again, I love that you had the buy-in of the actors, because honestly, between the way there were just certain shots, and actually I'll mark it when we get to that point as spoiler, because there is a shot, or there's a scene I want to talk about, kind of break down, because it just was so good. But there's just so much that as I was watching this, I was like, man, they really cared about this film, because damn, it just gave me the feels watching this, because sometimes, you could have big productions out there, they'd be great films, but they could also be shit. But I think some people miss out on these independent, like, I don't know if this was crowdfunded or self-funded, but either way, you put this together and you put out a solid project. And I mean, that sounds like that takes a lot of work and time.
It really does take a lot of work and time. It's like I think I didn't make They Look Like People until I got a job. I started working as an editor and a director in a studio, and it was almost like I needed a day job. And everyone's different, but I think
Sure.
that I so many, again, my friends have gone bankrupt, all these things, and I also just needed to have a job for my life. But I was like, okay, now I have a job, now I can pay rent, I'll save up some money, and we'll go make a movie. And I think that's sort of how we approach these, is we use the money from the previous one to go make the next one. And that's great. It's also great to make big movies. I mean, it's been exciting because I sold a TV show a few years ago or recently through Flanagan's company. And so it's really exciting to work on larger movies and have these bigger things going on. But also it's sort of like there's something, I don't know. Do you know the Addams Family that did Hellbender?
Oh my God, yes. I've spoken with them a couple times. They are so cool, and their films are so like, they are a kind of a mind fuck. But I was talking with them and I go, how did you pull off this shot? Because it was stunning, and the colors, there was just, the color palette of Hellbender was beautiful.
I fucking love that film, and I love their process. And there is something about that you just can't get anywhere. There's a special thing about all that you can't get anywhere else. So that's it's good to be in both worlds, or whatever.
Well, you mentioned They Look Like People, and I just have to say, holy shit, that film, it was such a tight script, and the relationship between those two and the tension you continually built. Like, that's why when I was watching this, I'm like, this feels familiar, but it was a different aspect. But I was like, oh my God, this tension is building. And I'm like, my heart is pounding. And so I'm going to mark this spoiler, because I mean, it's not that much of a spoiler in a sense, but the part where Wilson thinks he found the stalker, and then you just see that group, and then the group's, in a sense, multiplies, my heart stopped. So I would like to know about just filming that scene and like going the back and forth, because the way that was presented, man, I was like, oh fuck, he needs to get. I was like, you gotta go. This isn't gonna work.
I
I
know.
was like, what the hell's gonna happen? And then
I
she's like, Wilson, no. I was like, you had me on edge.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I think it's so funny when people say like, "I watched your movie. I fucking hated it because it scared me," and I'm always like,
That's
"Thank you." I don't know whether to say sorry or thank you for
oh, I
some of these
loved
things,
it.
you know.
That's
So,
the whole point.
so yeah. So with that scenes, I think there was always this a feeling of a little bit of wish fulfillment, but
Mhm.
sort of fucked up going on, where it's like Wilson is this guy who was sort of like a kick dog, and his whole life, his personality was like, if there's a threat, just like close your eyes and hope it goes away and they leave you
Mhm.
alone, and needing to switch, but like always wishing that he could protect people, and just, not knowing how, or not being brave enough. And he was like, my sister's in trouble. I need to change. I must change.
Yes.
And so he goes through this change, and there's a kind of wish fulfillment. There's even like a little montage. And I was hoping that, there's a certain amount of like, yes, finally, you're growing up, you're becoming a man, like
Yes.
great. But also at some point being like, oh no, what is happening to you? Like you've, the that Pinocchio. I actually was just on a podcast talking about the movies that scarred you, and I brought up Pinocchio. And so the
I love
section,
that
where he
podcast.
goes and grows up too fast or something. Yeah, I mean that was a blast. That movie's fucking scary. But yeah, there's this process of growing up and this wish fulfillment, and it's like, yeah, I just become a man. I go out on the street and I take care of my problems. I punch this guy in the face and then even if you do, you get a little stronger. Like I wanted there to be that, like, no, dude, no, like you think you're a man now, but you're stronger, but you're still a kid that like thinks this is a video game or something, or like you're a knight in shining armor and you're gonna get fucked.
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
He had me on edge. I was like, better not kill. I was like, this better. I was like, oh fuck. Like I was so prepared to like fight the screen myself. Like you put me through therapy watching this movie. And I when I tell you, that's why I do. The other thing that brought me to this film is lately there seems to be a really good push towards horror and mental health and a real or positive aspect of just
Mhm.
displaying it. Like I think with Resurrection was another one, and then Watcher had a good aspect, and so that's why I was like, I saw the log line and that shot, and I was like, I need to watch this. I messaged Kayla. I was like, can I please, please, please? And so when I'm watching this and that scene happened, though, I tell you, man, I was ready to fight. Like I was like, I'm gonna be right there with you, man. I was like,
That's
man, this
awesome.
interview is gonna be rough tomorrow if he does that. I was like, ooh, but I
Awesome.
also I want to ask though, because again, I thought this was done so well. The fight scenes, or like, wow, how I
Yeah.
mean, you're talking that you have a limited production, and I'm curious, the rehearsing for them, I mean, it looked very real, and it was kind of like, it was brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting thing, and I think so. We try to challenge ourselves with each film and do something we didn't do the previous time. And I think
Mm-hmm.
we thought, okay, if we want to make it physical, let's see if we can work on that aspect of it. And so we got, that actually, there, as far as the production budget, a fair amount went into that, and the safety of it and things like that. So we had
Sure.
two wonderful guys in LA work with McLeod and Evan, because they live in LA together. So they practiced it a bunch and sent me the videos. Kerry Wong, who ended up working on the Avengers, or he was like he was really cool. But I think that the funniest part of all this actually is Nate DeLong. I worked with him. He was a friend of Evan, and he's an MMA fighter, a real MMA fighter who
Oh
fought in
God.
Thailand and was like a national, like ranked, in Muay Thai and stuff. And he's like 6'2", maybe 6'3", and like has about 60 pounds on me. And there's videos of us practicing it because I was like, okay, cool. But he wanted to get into this stuff, but had never done it, had only actually hurt people. So like rehearsing it with him,
Oh my God.
I was like, this is not probably a good idea. Like, I'm not tiny or whatever, but the videos of it is like, geez, man, I got, he's doing like all this stuff. I was like, whoa. So, came out of that alive. But all the people were great, so that was exciting on set. We made sure to have the space and the time to do it right, do it safe. And the actors really threw themselves into it. I think, there was a conflict we experienced during it that, like, if I'm here talking about my film, I don't know how much I should talk about this, but I love Ong Bak and all these wonderful movies that celebrate the athleticism, or even The Raid. I mean, I think that stuff is really fun.
Sure.
But there was definitely a moment, because we had more fight scenes planned at one point, but there was a moment where we were like, okay, we like fight scenes because they're cool. But like, this movie is not about it being cool. It's about it being like feeling helpless and feeling bludgeoned and all this other stuff. So we went through a kind of renaissance during the production where we like redid a lot of the stuff to make it feel sort of nastier and dirtier and less cool, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
it was like grimy, like it felt like it felt like the main characters didn't stand a chance. Like they were fighting for survival. And again, that's what we sometimes we're doing in life, especially when it comes to mental health. So I really I loved it. It just went to it went to the aspect of the film, like or the aesthetic. I really loved that aesthetic. And so no, I like even that last fight scene with how it was lit and in that room. Oh
yeah.
Palpitations, my blood
Yeah.
pressure. Like I should send you my doctor bill. Like, whoa, I need it. It was like, how am I going to calm down after watching that? And also some of the effects that you did were like, how did you? I don't even know how you pulled some of that off. It just looked so good.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think I was talking to this on another, I forget who I was talking this with, but there's, the thing when you have a very limited budget and a crew of just me and the actors, and I can light and I can shoot, but I also am not an expert on some of these things, and so we sort of, there's sort of a dual aspect where you write for things that you're pretty sure you can pull off, and you lean into things that you can do with camera tricks, and I think also both because VFX are we had a colleague that were able to do the VFX, and that was great. And I think Hellbender is actually a perfect example of these kind of homemade but unbelievably impactful effects that you can pull off if you just are, you do it right and you experiment and try all these things. So there's one aspect of it that's like, okay, let's write for stuff that we're pretty sure that we can do, stuff that will feel impactful and feel physical. And then the second aspect actually is kind of letting go.
Okay.
Of like in the Rusalka, the Siren, there's a scene where that was in the script where she walks across water, and we tried it so many different ways, and we were like, we got to let this one go, and we'll do it in the next one. Because I think I don't want to bite off way more than I can chew and have the film suffer, even if it's like a cool image or something really awesome. So there's a kind of like zen, like, okay, we have to let that one go. Let's lean into these other ones, and and try to translate the kind of larger than life stuff that's in my head into practical reality, and lean into the practical reality so as to get excited about what you can do, basically.
I mean, I really enjoyed it. Again, to all those listening, watching, When I Consume You is out now. I highly recommend it. But before we end this, I have just a general few questions about horror in general. So I kind of think I might know one of the films you've enjoyed this past year, Hellbender.
Yeah.
Fucking fantastic. Like I completely agree with you on that. What are some other horror films that you really enjoyed this year?
Oh gosh, this year I don't know whether it's because I've been in a wormhole or the pandemic. I was actually talking to a bunch of friends. I was like, "What have you been watching recently?" And they're like, "Dude, Seinfeld." Like, like they're like, "I just need, there's something about sort of needing an escape."
Hmm.
Uh, I think I watched, this is not horror, but this was at Fantasia, which is why I watched a bunch of movies there. I watched a movie called Beyond the Infinite 2 Minutes,
Oh,
which if you haven't seen, it's also it's Japanese production, and it's about these guys that work in a coffee shop, and their monitor in their room and the monitor in the coffee shop have a 2 minute delay, so they can see 2 minutes into the future, um, and all the shenanigans that.
this
But it's a little bit like One Cut of the Dead because it's all one shot, but sci-fi and goofy and like very time twisty, primary,
oh, I want to see that.
like
That sounds amazing.
it it is just so inventive and so like it's the inventiveness, it's the feeling of that, it's that same feeling that the Hellbender gave me, that like that you're just like, wow, these people are just like really making it work. There's
Hmm.
so much excitement, with that kind of filmmaking.
That's it. I love to
uh
hear that. Yeah, no,
yeah.
I'm looking this film up.
And last, I guess it's probably Midnight Mass. I think that's my favorite TV show I've ever seen. Uh,
The
it was a whole almost religious experience watching the thing,
hmm.
and because of my history and because of like stuff I've been through. I mean, I love Mike's work, but I felt like that was sort of like pure, unfiltered, 200 proof Mike Flanagan, and I just loved it so much.
That was
Yeah,
top tier in terms of horror TV show. Like it didn't let go and it was unforgiving.
yeah.
It was, yeah, I completely agree. I will also I want to just I didn't realize also another, I should say, name drop as well, I guess. But I've spoken with a writer director who I just adore, and it's a film that you also did the teleplay on, Gigi Sal Guerrero. I love Bingo
Yeah.
Hell, by the way. It was one of my favorites. So I mean, I can't think of any horror film that I left feeling like all warm and fuzzy after
Nice.
watching.
Yeah, yeah.
So knowing that you had a part in that, I had to be like, oh my
Well,
god,
I
I'm
mean, that was a
fanning
lot
out
of
over
fun.
that.
That was Gigi's movie, and it was Shane's movie, and the way I talked about it to them, that's like, look, this is your house and your life, and like, I'm like the contractor to come in and just like, rearrange some furniture for you. And it was actually I don't know. I joke that like making your own movies like throwing your own birthday party and inviting only yourself. It's like very
I love
looking
that.
inward the whole time. So it was actually really relaxing to just be like like a helper on, because that was Gigi's movie through and through. She had really, she had a lot of passion for the character, and she's a good, really great actress, so I think that sort of carried me through. I love the idea of Mr. Big when I talked to them, I was like, Mr. Big is like the ultimate shock capitalist. He comes in, ruins you, and then sort of like a vampire and takes it all up. So it was great. I mean, Shane and Gigi are good people, so I hope they keep making movies. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they mentioned your name. I remember because I was like, that's the other thing. It's like, I know I've heard his name before. And I went back and I watched it and I'm like, oh my God, because it yeah, that was one of my favorites of just because I really enjoyed the color and but I love the story and I love Lupita because yeah, I feel like
Yeah.
I'm becoming that in my old age. Like when she like bumped into the person with fucking hipster, like it's like I see you, I appreciate you. Um,
Yeah.
but I just yeah, again, I think that's awesome that you were still a part of that. And again, they look like people is everyone also needs to see that just. But I really can't praise this film enough because, again, as you said, it is such an emotional tale that it also has some really horrifying aspects, and some of it's supernatural, but also, again, some of it's just the real world. And I love how you captured that.
Thanks, man.
So before I go, or before you go as well, is there anything like what's next for you?
So there's bigger stuff, and it's always in the works, and it's very exciting, but I can't really talk about it much. But we may in the meantime, well, we'll see. But there are some projects that the team and I are thinking about for this year or next. You know, we have some scripts, we have some things. There's one that's sort of about two people that discover a cursed play that sort of promises them some promises if they perform it, and they realize part of the way through that the play actually might be a ritual. There's some like cosmic horror there. Excited about that one, but very contained.
That sounds so good.
And then there's thanks. I'm excited about that one.
Like,
and then there's one that's about like an indie band that discovers this book, like a songbook that they think will sort of revitalize their career, but it ends up calling back spirits of the dead, and they have to kind of deal with that. So those are the two that we're thinking about.
See, that one I know is gonna get me. I will tell you right now, I don't fuck with that shit. Like, absolutely not. Like, one of our co-hosts, he's like, "Yeah, I've got a Ouija board." I'm like, "Nope, not in my house. Absolutely not. I don't deal with spirits." And I love those films, but I'm like, "Nope." So that sounds terrifying, and I would be very excited to. My escape is horror, so I love like it's crazy, but yes, during the pandemic, that's really what got me through it. Is I watched a lot of horror, and I either discovered new artists, creators like the Addams Family. I never had heard of them or seen their work, and then Hellbender came out and just like, just blew me away. And then speaking with them was just on another level. And then again, same thing, like your film is on another level to where like I'm gonna have to rewatch it again just after talking with you. But to everyone,
awesome, man.
you gotta see this thing. It's so good. I loved your aesthetic, and again, just the bond between those two, the emotional tale, and then the bits of horror when they come out, they are nasty and gnarly. And that's what makes, to me, a great horror film. So kudos.
Awesome,
again.
man. Well, thank you. Well, so great to be here and talk to you about it.
And well, thanks again. And to everyone, bye.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Horror Hour. See you next time.